Do you ever wonder if you're dressed most effectively for that next sales meeting? The data suggests that prospects actually make instant judgments about a salesperson, which has a massive influence on whether they're ultimately going to purchase from them. Having the right appearance for a sales meeting can actually make a much bigger impact on the sales outcome than you might think. In fact, getting it wrong could put you at a huge disadvantage in your sales meetings. In this video, I'm going to show you how to dress for sales meetings. Check it out. Number one, take into account how your prospects dress. So this is really the most important point that we can make here, which is that generally you want to dress pretty similarly to your prospects. And so I'm going to get into a little more nuance in just a minute, but overall, what you want to first do is take into account the types of dress that your prospects typically have. So I'll give you two very different examples. Let's say you sell in the investment banking world. Now, in the investment banking world, your prospects are going to typically be most likely in suits, right? So if you're selling to people who are very often wearing suits, then that's a really important indicator. You don't want to be dressed way more casually than those folks. On the other hand, though, if let's say you sold to Silicon Valley entrepreneurs or just your typical run-of-the-mill homeowner, these people are much more likely to be dressed very casually. In fact, I just recently read an article about how in the Silicon Valley world, the person who is the least well-dressed in the room, the person who's most casual, is likely to be highest up the totem in terms of importance in an organization. So you don't want to show up with those people and be completely overdressed because you're going to have a mismatch. The general rule is that most humans are going to most likely connect with the person that most reminds them of themselves. Now, we want to take that with a grain of salt because we don't want to just dress exactly like our prospects, because in some cases that could make us come off as unprofessional or could ultimately lead to some other issues. But the most important thing is to first really be focused on how your prospects are actually dressed. Number two, disheveled is crushing. This is actually not so much just about dress, but also just about general appearance. I see so many salespeople, particularly in places like the trades, but even more broadly, where you'll have a salesperson who just probably never fully took care of the way they looked. And so even at their best day, are still looking really disheveled. And the challenge that this can bring is that it essentially exudes a lack of professionalism. So we really want to pay attention to how are others going to be perceiving us. And if they're going to be perceiving us as disheveled, this can really be problematic. And so disheveled could mean that your shoes are really scuffed up or look bad, or your hair is all over the place, or just your shirts are wrinkly, right? These are just little things that have less to do with the specific overall outfit and more to do just with the general appearance. Number three, this is probably the most important rule. Be better dressed, but not mismatched. And so this plays into the first two ideas here, which is that we typically want to come in a little bit above our prospect's level of dress. Now, of course, there are limits to that, right? If you're already selling to people who are in a suit, then you're just going to match them. You're just going to wear a suit. And if they're wearing a tie, you're going to be wearing a tie as well. On the lower end, which is the much broader spectrum of who most people are selling to, if you're selling to, let's say, that entrepreneur or that Silicon Valley CEO who's wearing a t-shirt and jeans and sandals every day, you probably don't want to be showing up in the t-shirt, jeans, and sandals. You want to come off as just a little bit more well-dressed. So that could mean, if you were selling to them, it might mean that you're just wearing a button-down shirt and a pair of nice jeans and shoes, right? It's still pretty casual, but it's just a little bit more professional than the level of casualness that maybe your customer or your prospect is wearing. So again, typically a little bit better dressed, but not mismatched. I find over and over again that when people follow that general idea, what they're going to find is that they're never going to be creating problems for themselves. Being the best dressed person, it's never going to ultimately help you. It's not going to make you close the sale. But what it can do, or being appropriately dressed can do, is help you avoid losing a sale that you might have lost because of just ultimately turning off a prospect who felt that you looked unprofessional. And number 4, pay attention to the details. This is probably my biggest pet peeve with the way a lot of salespeople will dress, is that they don't pay attention to the little details that can really cause them to come off as pretty careless and thoughtless in the way they dress. You know, you'll see a lot of tradesmen who will come in and they'll have a nice, company button-down shirt with khakis, but then the shirt is untucked or it's hanging out on one side. Or you'll have someone who's just wearing really wrinkled clothing, or their shoes are really scuffed up or really old looking. And thus, as a result, the prospect is not necessarily looking at the specific details on a conscious level, but on a subconscious level. They're just taking in the totality of what they see, and they're making instantaneous judgments. In fact, the data shows us that a lot of decisions are made about a complete stranger in the first microseconds, the first milliseconds of when they first take in the whole appearance. Now, you can't control all of your appearance, right? We're human, we're all different, but what you can control is the way you ultimately put yourself together. So pay attention to those little details and notice that what you really don't want is to really stand out in any way that would come off as egregiously mismatched. Number 5, in the moment, match them in small ways. This is really one of the most powerful and really tactical changes that you can make in terms of your appearance. And I'll give you an example of how I might implement this in my own selling. Now, when I go to meet with prospects, I'll literally get onto a plane and meet with CEOs of companies to discuss 6-figure consulting projects. And I'm always going to show up in a suit. Even if I think that they're going to be in jeans and a t-shirt, which very few of my prospects ever do, but I'll always show up in the suit. What I will do though is if a prospect is dressed very casually, I'll take off my coat. And if they're really casual, I might even take off my coat and roll up my sleeves. And I might even let out a button. So that way, even though we're dressed in a way that's not entirely matched, I'm going to match them in small ways in the moment that are going to cause them to feel a little bit more comfortable. And so actually you can get it a little bit of both ways, where you get the credit of looking professional by having worn that suit, but at the same time, then in the moment when you show up, you take off the coat or you unbutton your sleeves and roll them up. Now you are going to create a better connection because you're going to appear more similar to them. By making those little changes to appear more similar to them, you're going to really increase the likelihood that you ultimately build that trusting connection. Because big mismatch is always going to be a problem. And so even if you didn't show up with the exact appropriate outfit for them, you can still make some small changes, typically dressing down. It's obviously hard to dress up, right? If I'm meeting with a prospect who wears a suit and tie and I show up in a polo shirt and khakis, it's very hard to match up to them. But if I showed up in the suit and they're more casually dressed, I can dress down in some smaller ways. So there is how to dress for sales meetings. And if you enjoyed this video, then I have an awesome free ebook on 25 tips to crush your sales goal. Just click right here to get instant access. Seriously, just click right here. Also, if you got some value, please like this video on YouTube because that really helps me out. And be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel by clicking right here to get instant access to a new video just like this one each and every week.